All right, so welcome to week number 3 of Aging with Grace. Today's topic is living with grace. And that came about with, as we move into our later years in life, I just met with a person the other day that would have really benefited from this class. But this is the part where we talk about money. And the legalities with all of that. I'm very, very blessed to consider Barb Kvittiem-Barr a personal friend of mine. She's from Minnesota, so she passes the background check. She also, after college, went to seminary for 3 years and was a Lutheran pastor for a period of time, and decided that she was going to become a very successful CPA instead of a struggling pastor. But she is a woman with a beautiful heart. She's a certified public accountant. For full disclosure, she's my accountant, and I trust her emphatically. And so she's here today as someone that you can trust, as someone that you can ask these questions of. Her motivation today is to see everyone in this room be successful. Okay? So let's pray. Gracious and holy God, we give you thanks that once again you have called us together as your sisters and brothers to be good stewards of what you have given us. Bless our time together. We thank you today for Barb and the gift of her time. And just open our eyes, open our ears, and open our hearts to hear your direction. In your son's name we pray. Amen. I'm just going to turn it over to Barb, okay? She doesn't need a whole lot of introduction anymore. No, but I will tell you this, that I just remembered, okay? No joke, but we have more of the 5 wishes up here if you want them. And I forgot to mention this last week. After you fill this out, you can take it to your PCP and they will download it into your medical file. Super cool, yeah.
So we don't have a joke? Is that the deal? I'm going to work on it. Oh, okay. So I'm Barb, and like Jose said, we've been friends for a long time. I actually knew his mother before I knew him, if you're familiar with her and her ministry, her wonderful ministry over all these years. But and I actually went to seminary for 7 years. It's a 4-year program, but I worked full-time in the Lutheran Church, and so it took me a long time to get through. And after that, that was back at the time when women were brand new as Lutheran pastors, which was maybe many of you remember those years. And we never really quite got the call that my husband also went to seminary, never quite got the call to a church that we wanted or that was right for us. I did serve a church for several years, but anyway, I just sort of turned into a CPA, and that's a different story for a longer time, I think. But I'm happy to be here and to chat with you. I had a chance to meet a few of you beforehand. Most of my work is with estates and trusts, so I'm going to sort of focus on that today. But along with the estates and trusts, what I have is many of my clients have gone through a loss, or many of them are elderly, many of them have lost a spouse or a partner, and I've seen so many wonderful things happen and so many really not so wonderful things happen. So I think I just want to share some of that knowledge with you and information about that. Now, one of the most important things, and I know you've been talking about a lot of different topics already, but planning and communication. In my family, we joke that when my husband gets old, I don't know, they don't include me on this, but he said, when I get old, I'm not going to go to a nursing home, or I'm not going to go to a long-term care. I'm going to go to our daughter's basement, and I'm going to live in a cardboard refrigerator box. So that's his extent of planning. But no, we've done a lot more planning than that. I have 2 daughters, and the one daughter is 28, and she's quite a young woman. I told her I was going to be speaking today and just sharing a little bit, and she said, well, are you going to do a PowerPoint presentation? I said, no, not me. I said, I'm just going to talk. She goes, well, you ought to have something for people to look at. And so I sent her a little, here, I'll just sort of pass these out. I sent her a little Word document with a couple of pieces of words on it, and she took them and turned them into these wonderful, really nice things. I'm not doing very good here, so here, maybe. So, Jose, maybe you could help pass things out. There you go. Just make sure people get them all around. So, and this really, I mean, we're just going to go over these different things, but she thought you really needed to have some kind of piece of paper. So she's a real organizing person, organizes everything, and so she made this really nice looking thing. So the first thing I really want to talk about is communication and planning. So you've been talking about that, I know, and that 5 wishes document is one of the best things. It takes you through things easily and gives you a way to talk to people about it. It's important, first of all, I think, to talk to your spouse or your partner and your family so that when things happen, whether it's long-term care, whether it's someone passing away, needing different kinds of medical care, so that people know what your interests are and what your desires are. And honestly, that's kind of a hard thing to talk about. I grew up in a Norwegian family, and we never talked about finances. We never talked about things like this. Even when I turned into a CPA and I had my own practice and I met with clients all the time, my folks still didn't really want to talk about finances with me. It was until probably the last 5, 6, 7 years of their lives that we really started talking about that because, well, I kept after them. But that is really important. And also, it helps your family and friends to know what kinds of things you want in the end. So really just communication with as many people as you can, but especially those that are close to you and big part of your family, and again, your spouse. I do see many times when, especially in the older ages of people, where one person really has kind of run everything, and they've found their own rhythm in the couple. One person does this, one does all the finances, and one does all the, whatever else, kids or whatever. And when one is gone, the other one really isn't familiar with the stuff that they need to be. So I really encourage you to use that 5 Wishes brochure. Pastor Jose, he knows what he's talking about when he says to be able to use that. The third item listed under the communication and planning is your medical people and other professionals. And like he said, you can bring that document to your PCP, and they will have it, and they'll know exactly what you think you want. So I think that's really important. The bigger thing I wanted to talk about is some of the legal documents. Now, I'm not an attorney, I'm a CPA, so I can't legally give you legal advice. I'm not a financial person. As far as a planner, I can't tell you what stocks to buy or anything like that. What I can tell you is about the taxes and some of the experiences that I've had and some of the just the problems that I've seen come up, things like that. So first of all, maybe a little talk about wills and trusts. It's really important to have something in writing. I would guess most of you have a will, and I would also guess most of your wills include a trust. Maybe I'll just spend a couple minutes talking about the importance of having a trust in there. You maybe have talked to people who have had really tough situations with probate when someone passes away. One of the main reasons to have a trust is so that you don't have to, you hopefully wouldn't have to go through probate. Is this always popping when I'm talking? I'm trying to not do that. So a trust, so you generally, a will say, this is what I want when I die. I want my stuff to go in this trust. And I want it to go to my spouse or whoever else. And generally, the will divide items into, you put it in, the will say, I'm making a family trust. So then you want to put all your items, all your things that you own, your house, your bank accounts, all of those different things in the name of the trust. It doesn't really change anything for you at that point. It's called a revocable trust, which is you can change and do whatever you want with it anytime. It's not a separate tax return. It's not a separate entity. It's just a way of holding your assets. When a person dies, generally that says, okay, so then when the first of us dies, we want to take our assets and all the things that we own and split it into two things. We want the survivor trust and the decedent's trust. The decedent's trust, a lot of times people are kind of confused about that, but it really is a separate entity, and we actually usually have to file a tax return for that. Lots and lots of times people say to me, well, we have a trust, and I thought that was supposed to make things easier, simpler. I thought it was supposed to help things. Well, it makes some things easier. Like you don't have probate, you don't have ownership issues, you don't have questions like that. But there are other complications that come with it. So I probably hear that 50% of the time when people think that having a trust make things simpler for them. Sort of it does, but there are other pieces that come along with that. And I can talk about that if you want me to, but I don't want to, bore you into a lot of those things, except to say that it doesn't solve, it doesn't make everything really easy, but it does tell exactly how you want your assets and your inheritances and all those different things to be given away. Many of you maybe have, about estate tax. So an estate, when you die, when anyone dies, if their assets are the things that they own, that's your brokerage accounts and your IRAs and your house and your cars and whatever. If it's over a certain amount, you actually have to pay tax on it. Right now, for a married couple, it's $27 million. So, I don't have to worry about that. He doesn't have to worry about that. Probably, I don't know, maybe nobody in here has to worry about that. But there are other things that come along with that. One thing to note, though, unless the law is changed, in 2025, it turns back to $14 million, approximately. As a married couple, that's only $7 million. And it'll be adjusted for inflation. We think that it won't revert back, but the legislators have to do something about that first. So currently, starting in 2025, that exemption for estates goes way back down, and only $7 million per person. Again, adjusted for inflation. So, if you have a couple of homes, it doesn't take much these days $7 million is still big. But, that's possible. So just to let you know about that, one of let me see. The other thing I would say about wills and trusts is one of the good things, a lot of good things about it, but it also lets you say what you want to give to different people. So, for example, you want I had somebody 2 days ago said, my mother willed me her sewing machine. I said, I have my mom's sewing machine too. But, that's kind of nice because sometimes that's a good way to have a chance to talk to your kids or other friends and family about particular things. And maybe even that's a good conversation starter. You say, I've been thinking about things, what are you interested in? Or, like I got my mom's piano too. That was very sentimental to me. And if my siblings had argued with me and told me I couldn't have it, I would have been upset. But, so in your will or your trust, you can say who's going to get particular things. Now, a lot of times you don't do that, and things are just divided equally or whatever. But you're able to do that, and that's helpful. Maybe not so much for you, except as a conversation starter, but certainly for those that come after you, so that they can work together and have a common mind about understanding what you want and what you intended and what you wanted. Next on my little list here is powers of attorney, and I know you've been talking about that. Your booklet has your powers. I think it has both a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney. You just never know. You don't have to be, over 60 to have a financial or a healthcare power of attorney. You can be any age because you just never know what's going to happen. And you're really you're being proactive about understanding, having people understand what you want, but also allowing someone else to be able to work on your behalf or make medical decisions if they had to on your behalf. So I really, really encourage you to fill those out, get those to your doctors and your family so they know what you want. Just a comment on beneficiaries. A lot of times people set up beneficiaries on their accounts, their retirement accounts or whatever, many years ago, and maybe things have changed. Maybe you have more kids, or well, maybe not more kids, but grandkids, or different things that have happened in your family. So I think it's really important to just take a look and make sure that those kind of things are also up to date. Asset listing, including insurance policies. Both my parents have passed away. When my dad passed away, he actually passed away. It was an accident, and he died quickly after being on life support for several days. Our family was in 100% agreement in what we wanted to do for him. We knew he was an old farmer. He wouldn't wanted to be hooked up to a machine for years and years, or even days to speak of. So we were very clear about what he would want. But he fell. It was an accident. He fell at a restaurant, but that's neither here nor there. But it turned out my mom had actually paid, $3.95 a month on some credit card, and had for years had been paying this little accident insurance policy. Who knew? She didn't even know. When my mom passed away, we were going through, and this is my business. I do this stuff all the time. But when she passed away, we were going through all her stuff. We found a life insurance policy that her mom had bought for her when she's 8 years old. And it was worth $5,000. Obviously, at the time when she was 8 years old, which would have been 80 years ago, it must have been a big deal policy. So anyway, as a survivor, I can say it's really hard to go through those things. It's much easier if you know ahead of time, like if you've put all your information together so that it's accessible and people can know what's where and how to find it and that. So just sort of think about that. You might be amazed when you kind of go through all the different, whatever you own, and just sort of make an inventory of things. Account numbers, passwords, locations of your bank accounts, and different things like that. Also very important so that people can have that. Also, passwords to digital things like Facebook. Even today, I have a friend whose mom passed away maybe 3 years ago. And every year on her birthday, my Facebook comes and reminds me it's her birthday. Those kind of things, we sometimes don't really think about that, but you would like to have the passwords and all those kind of things written down so that whoever is after you can handle it, can take care of it, can shut down the Facebook account. I found out just recently, maybe a week ago or two, from my husband, that if you have an iPhone and you have an Apple ID, which I do, you can actually do something. You have to go, guys, to the Apple store, but you can go and get some kind of access to your Apple ID account for whoever is after you. It's a big fancy code, but they can give that to Apple or the Apple Store. I don't know exactly what you do, but it actually will allow them to get into everything on your phone and your Apple account. Like we have, all kinds of passwords for PayPal and Venmo and Harbor Freight, maybe, I don't know, all kinds of things. Dale was at Harbor Freight this morning, so that kind of stuff. So that's worth checking out. And I apologize, I don't know too much about it. He just did it and said, you need to do this. And of course, I haven't had time, but yeah, I know. So anyway, so I think the Facebook thing, I don't know, that's a little creepy to me. When I get a notice that it's somebody's birthday, it's nice to remember them, but that should be shut down. So just sort of my own thought. Let me ask if there are any questions about that kind of stuff. Not Facebook in particular, but yeah. What does his question is, what does the estate have to go to probate? I'm not sure of the answer to that, but it's not very big.
When I was doing it, I'm also and when I was doing it, it was around 100,000, but I think it's gone up significantly.
For probate, my understanding in Arizona, it's more like 75,000. But I don't work in probate. Probate is if you have assets that don't automatically go to someone else, you actually have to go to the court, and the court decides where they go. Now, if you have a will, that's a good will. The court will say, okay, the will says do this, so do this. If you have assets titled in a trust, the trust rules, and so you generally don't have to go to court. But if you don't, if you have things that aren't in a trust, and you have really almost, it's a small number, it's not a large number, that you actually have to go to court and go through probate. And it's not a hard thing to do, but it's sometimes expensive, and it's a hassle. And very time-consuming, yeah. Especially, if everything got frozen at the time someone died, and you don't have access to a checking account or things like that for them. So, okay, let me ask. I have more things to say, but I thought, while we're talking about this,
Okay, let me give you the microphone.
you have to turn them on. There we go.
We have a question.
Okay, here.
We have a question about beneficiaries or executors, I guess would be the proper word. How far do you go down? We pick a younger brother, but then we're all getting older, and so we pick the younger brother's son, and he's getting older. How far out?
That's a really good question. So she's asked for picking not a beneficiary, but an executor of your estate. And by the way, being an executor of an estate is quite a responsibility. It really is. And I have big checklists that when I have an executor, I say, okay, you got to do all these things. How far do you go down? Well, that's your own choice, I guess. But you're right. If you have a brother or a sister and they're your same age, you probably want to start going down a little further. So I don't know that there's a particular answer to that, but it's a very good point. An executor does all kinds of things. They have to file the final tax returns. They have to see that your wishes are carried out, and they actually have personal responsibility for doing those things, filing tax returns, whatever. I do tax returns a lot, so that's why I keep bringing them up. Yeah, well, let's get her. I know. Let's her follow up first.
Well, taxes. If somebody
I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see what you have for a question, because it's a little different topic.
So I thought Arizona, unlike New York, when a spouse passes away, they still have access to all the joint accounts and like that. In New York, you definitely wanted to have a separate checking account for each spouse.
Anytime you have a joint account, the other person has access to it. So when one person on a joint account dies, that doesn't change things. The other person has equal authority and equal access to that account. And also, Arizona is a community property state, if you know what that means. That means, and I didn't intend to talk about people dying all the time, but I guess that's where we are on this. So when one spouse dies, the other gets everything that's community property, their property together, unless it had a beneficiary of someone else. And there's a step up in basis. So let me just give you an example of what a step up in basis means. A lot of people ask me, I bought my house at $200,000, and now it's worth $1 million all of a sudden in Arizona, in Phoenix area. So well, maybe I'll just sell my house. And with that kind of numbers, they're talking about a big gain and tax on that gain. We all have, along with some exceptions, $250,000 of gain that we can have tax-free on a house. Has to be a residence. You have to live there a certain number of years and things like that. And if it's a married couple that own the house, you get $500,000. You only get it. You don't get it every year, but so there's some rules about it. But once you have that $500,000, so in my example, if it was worth $1 million and you bought it for $200,000, $1 million minus 2 is $800,000 of gain, right? If you get $500,000 free, no taxes, you still have $300,000 that you have to pay tax on if you sell it when you're living. If you don't sell it when you're living and you pass away owning the house and your spouse gets it, their basis instead of their cost, instead of being that $200,000 that you originally bought it for, it switches up to $1 million. And then if you sell it for $1 million or $1.1 million the next year or something, you don't have any tax on it. So I didn't really mean to get into an example like that, but there are a lot of planning things you can do as well for taxes. How did I get on that? What was your question? Why did I get there? Oh, community property, yeah. 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 I don't know in New York. I've done one estate return in New York, but in Arizona, well, in any place, if you have a joint account, unless New York is an exception, a joint account, both owners own it equally. So, for instance, if you have an account with your daughter and you pass away, your daughter still has 100% access to it if it's a joint account. If it's just your account, then it basically gets frozen until it gets passed on to whomever. Does that make sense? Sort of? Okay. Now, your question was something about taxes, too, but a little different. Oh, memory care. Okay. So memory care, her question is, if someone is in memory care and they should be doing their taxes, how does that work? Well, they should be doing their taxes. There is a limit that if you're under a certain amount of income, you don't have to file taxes. But if the person in memory care has assets and they have dividends and capital gains and sales and Social Security and maybe a pension, but they're still in memory care, they are still required to file a tax return. The one good thing about memory care, or any kind of long-term care like that most of that amount generally qualifies as a medical expense. So, I have people that pay $10,000 a month for their nursing home care, So that's 120, that's a lot of money. And so generally, a lot of times it'll wipe out their taxes, but you don't know that until you actually prepare a tax return and find out. But yeah, I mean, just being in memory care doesn't disqualify you for filing a tax return. I find a lot of times I work with, I'll get to you just a second, I work with a lot of people, I work with several professional fiduciaries who actually are appointed by the court to handle the stuff for someone, either who is in special care or has passed away, didn't have family or do anything. And just yesterday, I did past tax returns for someone who died in 2022. We did 2019, 2020, 21, and 22. And I do that all the time. So a lot of times that is the case when people, especially if they've been in memory care and they don't have a family or someone that's helping them get those kind of things filed. It will catch up. It will catch up to you in the end, and not you, but whoever's the executor of your estate. Their responsibility, the executor's responsibility, is to make sure that all the final tax returns are filed. And that's old years. I might just make an interesting comment about that. If you happen to have a refund and it's more than 3 years past, you can't get the refund back. So there is a benefit in keeping up with your taxes, especially if you're going to have a refund. After 3 years past the filing date, you can't get or past the original due date, you can't get a refund back. And I have somebody who had $12,000 paid in, but she couldn't get that back. That was just last week. So, okay, what's your question?
I want to accentuate what you said. It's important to have.
You want to talk here?
It's where a power of attorney comes into play. If you have somebody that's going into memory care or something, having a power of attorney for someone that can handle your affairs, it's very important. The other thing I wanted to comment on is when you have a will or a trust, you want to keep you have a executor, as Barb says, and also in the trust is a successor trustee. I always want, as much as I hate corporate trustees, if everyone else is gone that you've appointed as a trustee, you should have a corporate trustee, a bank, attorney, or somebody that can handle your affairs if no one in your family or whoever you have chosen is no longer able to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. There are such things as corporate trustees, many of them around. I have a lot of trusts that the corporate trustees work with. Maybe people didn't have family members or friends to be executors, or maybe they just didn't want their family to have that responsibility. And they wanted an outside person or outside entity to help make those decisions. Now, I would say, having worked with many, there's some good ones and there's some not quite as good ones. So if you're looking at that, you really want to check them out, talk to the people, and see what kind of court cases. Sometimes they're also appointed by the court for someone with a will who doesn't have an executor. So, okay. Let me just go on to okay, sure.
You said there were 2 different kinds of trusts?
Sure. So I said there are 2 different kinds of trusts. There are a couple there are lots of different kinds of trusts, but what I mentioned is usually when someone has a will with a trust, the trust says when the first person, and the trust is usually called a family trust, so the Kvittiem-Barr family trust, which we have. And then when the trust usually says, when the first person dies, I want to divide the estate into 2 pieces. One is the person who died, their part, and one is the survivor. So you call it the decedent's trust and the survivor trust. We also can call it A trust and B trust, above ground and below ground. Kind of icky, but yeah, that's how I always remember it. So, and then when let's see, how can I explain this easily? The decedent's trust. So say you have $1 million, and your will and your trust says half of it's mine, half of it's one, and half of it's in the other. So the $500,000 goes into the decedent's trust. At the time that that person passes away, that becomes an irrevocable trust. There are two kinds of, well, there are, again, many different kinds of trusts, but there are revocable trusts and irrevocable, or revocable and not revocable. When you set up a trust in your will, that's a revocable trust. You can change it and do whatever you want anytime. It's not a separate entity per se. It doesn't do its own tax return. It doesn't have a separate ID number like an EIN. It is really you, but it's titled, things are titled in the trust. When someone passes away and that trust is divided into two, the decedent's trust becomes irrevocable by basically definition. And then the assets that are in there, then it's its own separate entity. It needs its own tax return. It needs its own, and the spouse or the survivor can get all the income from it and can usually even take money, other assets from it. But it still has a tax return requirement and a separate ID number, and it's a lot of paperwork. It's important, though, to do that, and most people have their family trusts set up that way. So the two trusts I was talking about is decedents and survivors, and that's how it divides. Okay, did that make sense? Kind of? Okay, yeah.
What's your take on having family trust versus each spouse has their own?
What's my take on having a family trust versus each spouse having their own? I think that would be a legal answer, but Arizona is a community property state, and I've actually never had any one of my clients that have separate trusts for each of them. Now, my parents lived in Minnesota, and that's not a community property state. They didn't have separate trusts, but many people I know in Minnesota have separate trusts for one and the other. I think it depends on your own situation. I guess I don't have a particular theory about that. So, okay, let me, the last little segment I have on my paper here is words of wisdom. I spend a lot of wonderful time with wonderful people who have oftentimes gone through something very tough. And so I usually ask them, what helped you through, or what made it right, what helped. And in fact, yesterday I met with a wonderful woman, and her name is Judy. And I asked her husband died about 7 years ago. I said, well, what would you say if you were going to give words of wisdom to someone? She said, don't sell your house within a year. I thought that was kind of strange. She said, and I even wrote that down here, because there are so many things you have to deal with, and you're going through grief, and I think it applies to any kind of big decision. Take your time when you lose someone. Take your time to make the big decisions. Now, you might not have time. You might need to sell the house for the money, or you might have someone. You might be in memory care or some other kind of long-term care where you really don't have a choice. But that was her first words of wisdom to me. The other kinds of things, and I've been talking about this already, have people around you that you can trust and gather them now. Pastor Jose is a great resource for people in the valley. He's bringing on in speakers, helping you understand all these things that are kind of icky and yucky to talk about, but really important. Gather people around you that you trust. Your legal people, your accounting people, your healthcare people, and then be sure that your family and friends, not friends so much probably, but family, know those people. I had, many years ago, maybe 30 years ago, I had an old New York attorney. came into my office. I'd started my practice maybe just a year or two before. He came in, I'd never met him before. He said, I want to come and meet you because when I die, I want somebody to take care of, I want to know who's going to help my wife. And she was this little, like, 4 foot nothing, wonderful, sweet woman from Germany. Could barely understand her, but just a sweetheart. I never met her, but he came in, he said, okay, I want you to know my name, I want you to know my situation, I came from New York, she's from Germany, this and that, and someday, when I'm not around, I'm going to have her come to you. Well, he did die, and 15 years later, she gave me a call, and she said, my husband is just passed away, and he told me I'm the one, I'm supposed to call you. And we did a lot of work together. So just, there's nothing wrong with just being, first of all, sharing that information, but gathering people around you that you know that your loved ones will be in good hands. Pastor Jose has said that several times, I know. What else did I have for words of wisdom? Yeah, after one spouse dies, don't sell your house within the first year. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's hard for some of us, maybe all of us, to ask for help and accept it. But I think that's really important. And there are lots of resources. I know you've had speakers here that have told you some of the resources for long-term care or social work kinds of things, all that kind of stuff as you're looking for your own self-care. Looking toward the future and thinking about when you might not be here or the long-term care that someone might need, that is self-care, taking care of yourself and taking care of your family and the people that love you, because it's really hard for them to make decisions if you're debilitated and you can't decide for yourself on different issues, where to be, to have someone already set and understanding and caring about you who knows the kinds of things that you want. So I think gathering people around you is really important and asking for help. I asked one of my coworkers who lost his wife maybe 3 years ago suddenly at an accident also. I asked him yesterday, what kind of advice would you give? He said, just keep on living. Find ways to keep on living. You'll have ups, you'll have downs, but keep on living. Keep doing the things that bring you joy. Keep people around you that bring you joy. And those that don't, just get rid of them. So he said, keep on living. Just do it. And then he also said, just breathe. And it's okay to have ups and downs. It's okay to have tough times. It's okay to cry when you come to the attorney's office or you're getting the tax return done or you're sitting with the nursing home person or the hospice person. I mean, they always have tissues with them, right? That's okay. But just keep on because you can do it. Anyway, that's kind of my things I wanted to talk about. What kind of question do you have? Oh, no. Mental related. His question is, you shouldn't sell your house within a year. Yeah, that's not an official opinion. That's her thought is, it's a mental thing. She said, I sold my house. Hello. She said, I sold my house and I wish I had just waited because she sold it and moved into this one place that she's just not happy there. But she felt like she had to do something right away, like get away from. And there might be a mental reason that you want to sell it right away too. So it's just words of wisdom, not anything technical. What else?
Couple things.
Sure.
Barb, can someone get a hold of you if they have a question after today?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Yeah, I have cards with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you can reach out to her, if you have any other questions beyond this. I got my story. Okay.
Okay.
And
let me say one other thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There, if you don't have an attorney, There are many good elder care attorneys, and if you're looking for an attorney to help you do maybe some financial planning for long-term care as you look ahead. I have one in particular that I work with in Surprise. She's absolutely wonderful, but I didn't hear back from her. I wanted to ask, can I give out your name and number? And I didn't hear back from her, so I'm not going to tell you that. But hopefully I'll hear back from her maybe today or tomorrow. But I mean, there's some really wonderful elder care attorneys, and that's the kind of person I would look for when you're trying to gather professionals around you.
Can someone call you just for that and just say, hey, I'm looking for a real estate attorney? There's so many different types of, because, we're whatever, but can they call you and get those kinds of referrals as well?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Or also professional fiduciaries, or if you're looking for
Exactly.
A corporate fiduciary to help, or a special needs situation, or things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for all of this information. Yes, ma'am. The question was, do we have a telephone number? The answer is yes. She has some cards, business cards that she will be able to pass out when we're done here. Okay? Thank you again. Let's give her a round of applause. That was...
Thank you.
I feel like I need to go home and take a nap.
Oh, come on. That was